Welcome back to Loaded and Rolling. I'm your host, Thomas Wasson. Today's topic for today is going to be talking about warehousing. I know I may be the resident trucking expert, but trucks go to warehouses, whether it's a distribution center, an actual warehouse, even a store. You're warehousing something in some form or another. And 2025 in this brand new year is bringing a lot of changes, hopefully in technology. And we're going to talk to some folks to tell us about what it means for trucking. I know that for drivers, one of the biggest challenges is waiting to be loaded and unloaded. And I used to joke with my drivers, I promise you the warehouse feels the same way. They want you to head in and head out as well. So let's dive right in here. Let's welcome on our guest, Jamie Cord. He's the CEO of JT Logistics. And Jamie, pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate being here.
So tell us a little about yourself and JT Logistics as well. Give us a little bit of a background.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm glad you started with we're talking about warehousing because I know more about warehousing than trucking. So thanks for that. JT Logistics is a national third-party logistics company. We've got pretty much every service for a seamless integrated end-to-end solution. Warehousing across the country. We've got our own fleet of trucks. We own a brokerage company, a staffing company, a packaging company, industrial services, and real estate development group. So we've tried to put an offering out there to provide a service or multiple services for, answering challenges with any customer that might come to us or we find along the way.
And talking about some of these big trends, because I know that a lot of times in the warehousing space, the most I usually hear from it is either detention numbers, if I'm a carrier, or if I'm looking at trends like the LMI, like how efficient, how full are our warehouses. Tell us a little bit about what are the things, especially in the warehouse space, that you all are looking at when you're thinking, hey, is this thing running well or is this thing not doing too hot?
That's a good question. If we could talk about the utilization of the warehouse, we focus on that a lot. And first of all, sometimes the challenge is overfilling a warehouse so that you don't have the appropriate amount of space to provide service efficiently in the building. What I use as a key or a percentage is usually 85%. Once you get into filling a warehouse at more than 85%, you bottleneck your dock. You have issues with loading, unloading, picking, staging, all those things. And one of the common challenges, operators try to fill a warehouse to 95% capacity, and it really it impacts efficiency and in a negative way. So we are trying to drive towards that 85% utilization, and then the accommodation or the keeping trailers in the yard or forecasts as solid as we can keep them, so that we don't overextend that space and make it harder for ourselves.
So it's like kind of having like slack in the system, because I've had it happen even on the trucking side where my trailers are used as storage, or sometimes they'll say that, well, we can't reach this item inside the warehouse because it's blocked by a bunch of other stuff. Is that kind of the risk reward, or you got to leave that little bit of slack? I'm always curious about what happens when it does break down from looking on the inside. What does that look like?
Well, there's two components to that, right? You can overfill your warehouse where it's hard to find stuff, or you've got things buried, right? We don't like to do that. Our WMS keeps us in check where we know where everything is and it's in its appropriate spot. But when you start to use your bulk space or your dock staging areas for storage, it becomes an issue. So the other side of that, though, is when you start to use let's leave it in a trailer in the yard, then you've got a challenge of when you need that SKU or that pallet or whatever it is, you've got to bring that trailer to a door and unload as much product as you have to get to it, which is an issue for efficiency too. So it's always better, in my opinion, to bring it in the warehouse, but then you also need to be cognizant of, are we bottlenecking the process and reducing efficiency?
Is it like robbing Peter to pay Paul? I could imagine I'm expecting maybe I have to load out certain amounts of loads per week from my trailer. So my docks need to cover certain shipments. But if I'm too full, I'm assuming that it's kind of like you get really far behind because maybe that trailer inside one of them had the certain SKU you needed, but now you got to unload the whole thing in your already full warehouse. So it like compounds itself.
Yeah, that's spot on. That's a challenge. The other thing is scheduling outbounds so that you don't have a lot of picked orders sitting staged, ready to load. And that comes back to your, planning of when do inbounds and outbounds happen, and coordination with drivers or carriers to make sure you have the appropriate space on your dock.
And when it's going on behind the scenes, like you're looking inside a dock, do you have do typical warehouses split their workforce between inbound and outbound, or is it kind of like a la carte? You're coming in, you're an inbound. You're coming in, you're an outbound. Do you ever have it split up, or is the workforce like tied to a certain amount of trailers, which kind of explains some of the live load wait times and stuff?
Well, most of our people are cross-trained to do both components, whether it's inbound or outbound. And we try to space out through the day both of those activities. So we're not just doing all of our outbounds in the morning or inbounds in the afternoon or whatever. We like to keep it staggered throughout the day, and the same people touching the product, loading the trucks or unloading the trucks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you get a little more familiar in terms of like specialization. And do you do a lot of preloading trailers or live loads? I remember when I worked at a large carrier, we preferred like preloaded trailers, a lot easier. But when I worked for a smaller carrier, I had to wait and try to get live load appointment times. Does a warehouse have like a strategy if you want to preload a trailer or live load it, or is it really based on, I guess, your capabilities?
Well, there's a lot of advantages to the drop trailer solution where we can load it and have it ready for a driver just to come in and hook onto. You talked about detention and other scheduling challenges. It does provide value to us if a trailer's in a door and we can do it when we can do it. Now, when we have drivers hit their appointment times and everything's on, the perfect schedule, then there's no issues. But drivers sometimes arrive early, or, they come in 2-3 hours late every once in a while, and we have to jockey our workforce and make it happen, which we do. But some of the things we've seen lately is a lot of companies go into a drop trailer pool or a solution where we've got trailers in the yard that we can shag into doors and we can load them as we can, and then they can just come in and hook on. And that actually improves a lot of efficiency.
That was one of the things I noticed was, I'll give an example, Procter & Gamble out of Ontario, California. Wonderful facility if it's preloaded. Not wonderful facility if you show up and it's even if you make your appointment, because you're thinking hundreds of doors, a huge facility. Mm-hmm. When we're looking at detention times, I know for drivers and carriers, having that detention is bad. From a warehouse standpoint, and this is a question I feel like a lot of drivers don't understand, do you all try to grade how quickly you can load the trailers and how much time it takes for you all as well?
Yeah, we definitely do. So we have KPIs and metrics that we measure every day related to the time it takes to unload or load. And we've gone to a digitization or an automation platform where our drivers are communicating with us through electronics. Basically, they can go in and send digital notes to us about if they're going to be late or early. We can assign doors through the platform. It reduces a lot of the human element where they have to come into the office, and it actually improves our ability to perform on whatever that metric is. We might have a 30-minute metric where we like to get trailers unloaded or loaded, but it's really about knowing and having clear information about when the trailer is going to show up and what we're expected to perform against. And the automation and the digitization of that has been incredibly impactful.
What are some of the technologies? My favorite one I heard recently was a problem with warehouses is you have to count. So there'd be a person assigned to, hey, check and see where everything's at, scan it. Someone has said they can use drones now and have a drone flying around the stacks in a warehouse. What are some of the things that y'all are working on or looking at to try and save time, speed up that in-house process?
Well, you're putting me on the spot there. We haven't done it yet. We've been looking at the same thing, and I'm sure we all go to the conferences and we see the really nice, shiny stuff. We're like, the drones you're talking about. We've weighed the different, does it make sense economically? Does it save time? Does it reduce the human element? We haven't pulled the trigger on doing it yet. I know a lot of companies are going to that, but right now we're a little more old school as far as checking everything. We have a tier 1 WMS where we, obviously we use the scanners and everything into the inventory, but we haven't gone to robotics or automating that with a drone or anything else yet.
And I had a forklift related question here. I love, I got a buddy who does natural gas deliveries. He owns a company. He says, my favorite customers are warehouses because their forklifts are powered by like natural gas or something. And I thought, wait, you mean to tell me there's gas powered ones? And then others have told me electric ones. Is there a specific one in the warehousing space that works better? Because I've encountered a lot of times I get the excuse, well, we broke 2 of our forklifts. We're super behind.
Really?
I've had it before. Yeah, I've had one or two where they'll say, "Look, our forklifts are down. We're operating like one or two, and this is like a 10 dock warehouse, or and it's kind
Okay.
of." I always wondered if it was like an excuse or if it was like these things
Uh,
actually break down and you got to fix them.
oh, they definitely break down, but I would say that we always have a backup plan. We don't ever have the excuse of we don't have enough forklifts. The opposite for me as an owner of a company is, do we have too many? Are we paying for more than we really need? And we have an utilization report that comes out every week that shows the number of hours and the usage of all of our forklifts. But to your question, we have a dual fleet. We've got propane lifts and we've got electric lifts, and a lot of times it's driven by the initiatives of the customer in relation to like the green initiative of using electric lifts. We've also found that electric lifts are a little more economical, especially if you're using propane lifts all day long. They can get fairly expensive compared to just battery, charging your electric lifts. So we are quickly moving to mostly our entire network going onto an electric lift program.
Are they like plug and play chargers? Do you have like to drive the lift onto a platform? I always wondered how they charged it because most of the time I talk to people who talk about charging trucks outside of the warehouse, not the lifts inside.
They're all chargers inside the building. We have what are called opportunity chargers or quick chargers, and then we have the normal battery pack chargers that take 4 to 6 hours to get to a full charge. So we have both, but they're all inside the building.
Okay. And I want to look at collaboration. I know I'm throwing a lot of questions at you, but I don't ever get to talk a lot about warehousing, and it's super exciting for me. I always wonder what goes on behind the scenes. Usually I just hear about as soon as it hits the door, you're waiting on a light to turn a certain color. But, looking at collaboration with carriers, because you're working with different carriers, in-house fleet, external fleets, are there any do's and don'ts that can help the carrier themselves understand and make their experience coming in and out a little bit better? Any best practices?
I think one of the challenges we have is the gap between the carrier and the broker and the communication. And one of the things we've tried to help with is sometimes less people in the mix, or the ability for us to manage more components is a more efficient model. That we would have the ability to schedule. We have the ability to either broker it on our own with our own team, or put it on our own assets and provide more than one service. More than just the warehousing. And I'm not bad mouthing anybody. I mean, it is the world we're in, but sometimes getting clear communication with 2 or 3 other people in the works, a carrier or a broker or both, can add intricacies or challenges to just getting the right information or staying up to date on when is the truck going to show up. So like I said earlier, the digitization and the automation platform we're using has become very helpful, but also the ability for us to do more, where if the customer would allow us to be a freight manager, broker it ourselves or put it on our own asset, that has also been helpful.
So that's kind of one of the hangups. I can imagine, let's say Thomas's company, Tomco. I have space inside your warehouse, but I don't use you as a broker or as a carrier. I'm going to use my own broker that I like, but then that broker has to find me a carrier, and then they talk to my broker who talks to you, but even though my stuff's in your... So that's kind of the complexity, right? You're just having to deal with those extra layers of an onion and then trying to figure out when they're going to arrive or not so you can even load their product.
You've heard the term too many throats to choke. Or it's easier when there's one. We would rather and prefer to be the quarterback on all of it. But of course, we have this scenario where we've got 2 or 3 other people we're always communicating with track and trace and, just getting the right information and understanding. But to your point, yeah, there's a lot of people in the mix sometimes. And, trucks don't show up or trucks are late. And we hope we get the information that we need to be efficient, but sometimes that's a challenge.
And I think you have a cool mentioning of the WMS, the warehouse management system. I'm familiar with talking with TMSs on the carrier side. Is that one of the things that, as we're talking about an Outlook, I heard almost it's like the holy grail, getting a WMS to talk to a TMS to talk to the carrier, so that way you just get that visibility instead of having to send an email or call somebody. Is that something that's kind of being in conferences and discussed, or are we a little ways out?
Oh, it's definitely being discussed. We have both, of course. We've got a tier 1 WMS and a tier 1 TMS. And then we've got a platform that integrates and automates to bring everything together, and also a scheduling tool. that has visibility to the driver or the carrier or the broker, all of them actually. And so they can go in and they only have one point that they have to go to be able to collaborate all that information together. And it's very easy. And then they have a link that they can click on that says, I'm 30 minutes out or I'm going to be 30 minutes late. And so that helps us. And they can also submit their BOL through there. They can get verification. It's taken a lot of the paperwork and the human error component out and integrated it.
Do you ever get, one thing I noticed is geo fencing for detention for the carrier. I can imagine as a warehouse operator, in and out times and paying detention has to be a super pain in the neck. What are some of your thoughts on that? Because I've been on the receiving end and also the other end of trying to collect that. And it seems like there's a lot of haggling over just when did someone actually arrive and when did they leave?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the platform I'm talking about gives you that information without a doubt. We do have geofencing around all of our warehouses, so we know when they've come into the lot and when they've left, and we can pull reports with 100% accuracy that shows, how long the carrier or the trailer was in our yard. So yes, that answers that question, and we don't have to go look at cameras or we have to validate with clocks on the wall. It's pretty simple.
And do you all at your warehousing locations? I always wondered, I've sent some drivers in spots where you basically go to an off-site area, you got to wait to be called, you have to check in with the guard shack. Or is the technology getting better now where you can just check in at the front and then you just get a message? What are some of the ways of managing, like even getting a hold of the drivers to send them in? Is that something that's like uniform across the industry, or when you're working on it, does it just depend on the location and their capabilities?
It does depend on the location, but in most of our locations now, we don't even require a check-in because of the automation of the platform. They can check in online with their phone, basically, and they can get appointed a door, and they can directly back in, get unloaded, and then hand in their paperwork after the fact. So in most of our locations, though, we do either have a guard shack or we have a customer service office. And the old school way is, of course, the driver pulls in, gets out of his truck, comes in, talks to the CSR at the window, gets a dock door appointed to him, and then he pulls in and backs in. We've tried to take that 10 or 15 minute experience out of the mix where they can just get all that information on their pad or their phone or whatever and go straight to the door.
And kind of looking at some forward-thinking statements, it's the beginning of the year 2025, larger warehousing trends. And have you been having conversations, or one of the questions I have, especially for the trucking side, is we're asking ourselves, is the threats of tariffs going to be a big deal? Is there a pull forward of people bringing more stuff in for fear of tariffs, or did the stuff earlier in the year with the East Coast labor strike means that they already pulled in their stuff? What are kind of the trends you're seeing and having conversations? Are folks expecting to just really fill up more of these warehouses, or are we in a pretty good state right now where it's kind of steady?
I'm not sure I have a crystal ball on that one, but I've had a lot of conversations with my customers about that, and I've heard both sides. A lot of them have been proactive to get ahead of it and move product in that they would have otherwise had in other countries or offshore. But I've heard customers say that the expense and the headache related to these changes sometimes isn't enough to actually bring the product in because of the cost differences. So it still might be cheaper for them and more economical for them to deal with tariffs and other issues that have been recent than to change their plan.
Is that kind of the big fear? Because I'm assuming you have to, if I'm storing my stuff at Tomco in your warehouse, you're going to charge me a amount based on how much space I'm taking, et cetera. So that's kind of the balance where you're like, well, if I spend X amount more on the tariffs or Y amount on depreciating the item, and then I just lose it because it's just paying for it to sit, right?
Well, there's that. And then you got to think about the labor cost and the difference between where they're performing their services now and then performing services in the United States. And that's just a fact, right? I would love for people to bring everything into the country and store it with me or any other 3PL, because right now there's actually probably more capacity in warehousing than there has been in a while. During COVID, everybody was trying to front load product and get as close to their customer as they could, pre-buy. And that has changed a little bit in the last year, 18 months or so. And it's more of a purchase it and a just-in-time solution. And there were a lot of developers 2-3 years ago that were building a lot of facilities, and right now there's a lot of open space on the market. So if I had my dream world, yes, the tariffs and everything you're mentioning would impact that, and people would bring more product into the country, and we would fill up warehouse space a little easier. But I'm not sure that's really going to happen.
Do you think when looking at like building more warehouses, is that the same kind of question where we still have a lot of excess space because of the last 2 or 3 years? Or do you think that like nearshoring will mean we're going to see even more warehousing space? Like if you had, speaking of the crystal ball, if you had like a dream location to build a bunch of warehouses, where's the hot places right now?
Well, there's 2 or 3 questions in that that you just said there.
Throwing a lot at you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of development happening. I know there is. There are developers that are putting up what are called spec buildings and then waiting. There's a lot of network optimization going on and consolidation right now with large enterprise customers looking at where's the density, where do I need to be, and they're doing build-to-suit solutions and putting facilities close to where their final mile or their distribution points need to be, and that's opening up space in second-generation locations where they may have used to have been. And then there's just general capacity that has opened up from changes in the market. I don't know if that answers your question, but to that, there is an ample amount of space right now. It's easier to find than it was a year ago. And landlords right now are a little more aggressive with working with 3PLs like us because they want to fill buildings.
So they need to find people to fill that space so they can keep bringing. I'm assuming there's a break-even point. Like I always wondered if like to have a profitable warehouse, if it had to be like a quarter, a half, 3/4 full, or if you just keep it at that 85% and stay efficient.
Well, so there's several different models of warehousing. You've got your dedicated solution where a customer is going to commit to a certain amount of space. Then you've got what's called public business or contract business that might be short-term or month-to-month. And you've got co-mingled, multi-tenant facilities. The best scenario for a 3PL is to have a dedicated solution where the customer covers the expense of the building, and you're not putting a lot of risk in how do I fill the rest to make money. But to your question, typically the model for a 3PL is that 70 to 75% of the facility being utilized covers the 100% of the cost. And then when you find ways to be more efficient or fill the additional space, that becomes profit.
That makes a lot of sense. I always wonder. I appreciate all the back-to-back questions here because I'm learning as we go here the fundamentals of work in a warehouse. We got a little bit of time left though. One final thing. Let's talk about what are you most excited about looking ahead. It is the first of the year, so in the media we all have to do this outlook stuff. But is there anything on your horizon or on your radar that you're keeping an eye on or most excited about?
That's the best question you've asked because that's my job. I'm the chief culture officer right next to being the CEO and president. And so I'm the visionary and I have all kinds of excitement for 2025. We're getting into very heavily the e-com world, the small pack, pick and pack and direct to consumer solution. And I see a lot of traction in that JT Logistics is going to fulfill a lot of solutions for big companies in 2025. We're engaged in multiple conversations for, Fortune 100 companies to get product to the doorstep. And so I'm excited about that. I don't think that trend's going to change. The Amazon, Wayfair, Etsy model is going to continue to grow. More people are shopping online than ever before, and 3PLs are growing in that space every day, whether it's the e-com or the packaging value-added services solutions. And so we're adapting to be very, very good at that. And you asked earlier about where do we want to be. My vision is that we want to be in 14 major hubs across the country by 2027. Right now, we're in 7 of them. And so, we talk about, the Chicago, Dallas, Phoenix, Reno, Atlanta, Birmingham, Harrisburg, PA. Those locations are exciting for us, and we're going to continue to grow our campus feel and develop more of a presence in those locations. But what we're doing and what we've done a lot in the past is where our customers want us to be, we will go there, we'll establish a footprint, and then we'll develop around it. So we've got a very good team with a lot of momentum right now. It's exciting. I've probably never been more excited about going into a new year. I'm hoping that the economy and everything that we're hearing about, with changes coming in the next maybe even days, is going to impact us in a good way. So I'm very optimistic.
We're going to be continuing to send those good vibes out. If folks want to learn more about JT Logistics or get in touch, what's the best way?
Well, so JT Logistics obviously has a webpage you can go to, www.jtlogistics.com, or send an email to info@jtlogistics.com, or I would be happy to field emails or phone calls if anybody wants to reach out. Happy to do it.
Perfect.
And we've got a large team. We've got 750 or so employees. There's probably one pretty close to anybody that wants to talk. And so I would love to communicate and engage however that would be.
Well, appreciate your time, Jamie. Thanks so much for coming on the show. A lot of great information as well. We're going to catch up again with you soon.
I appreciate it, and I'm honored. Thanks a lot. Take care.
That's going to be a wrap for today's show. But if you're just joining us, we will be on demand, YouTube, Apple, Spotify as well. While you're at it, check out the Loaded and Rolling podcast. That's FreightWaves.com/loaded and rolling. It's a newsletter. It's a podcast. The podcast itself comes out every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. The newsletter Thursdays at 2 p.m. That's it for this episode. We'll see you soon.